So you came all the way here from Cougar's Tooth, then? What for? Charlotte inquired, pushing his unanswered question to the side, fishing to find out who he really was out of all the desperate men that had swarmed her upon her arrival. Well, that's quite the long story, ma'am. Perhaps one to be told over a glass of whiskey? He offered, lifting his chin with a confidence mark. I'm not the drinking type. She expressed her lie with an earnestness that almost convinced him. Meanwhile, all the scattered bottles by her bed flashed before her eyes. You're quite complicated, though. He cocked his head, eyeing her stern. Not hungry, not thirsty. He chuckled faintly, and she tore her gaze away, suppressing a snort, but he didn't miss the crease that formed at the corner of her lips, encouraging his presence to linger further. What could I offer you, then, instead? He asked, shrugging broad shoulders. It's early enough for a cup of coffee, if you prefer that. Or are you the tea-drinking type? Her features softened, her ribs bruising in all her restraint not to laugh at his ridiculous pestering, and yet a stifled titter escaped her. Are you the harassing type? She returned the query, and he leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, assessing her quietly. No, he replied, his voice low, promising sincerity. I ain't. Never been. I apologize if I've given such impression. Well, you wouldn't need to apologize to me if you weren't that type to begin with, for you are. Harassing me. She snapped, and he arched a brow. You are harassing me by coming onto my property, trespassing it with your... He arched it higher as he anticipated her insult with great intrigue. Your mammoth-sized being. Trampling over said property, breaking into my barn while I work, delaying me mucking and feeding my horses with your inappropriate proposals, and just standing there like you don't have anything better to do than irritate me. At the very least, you can grab yourself a pitchfork and pick up horseshit. She huffed, flustered, and his brow began to slowly lower. All right. He shrugged again, and she blinked at him stupidly. All right what? She asked, and watched him near the stall. She flinched when he took off his coat, and he, alarmed by her frightful reaction in the hand that jolted to her gun, slowed down his movements. He then placed the coat over a hay bale, unbuttoned his cuffs at the wrists, and rolled his sleeves up to his elbows. What are you doing? Her voice shuddered, as she trembled at the sight of a man shedding a single piece of clothing, and she steeled herself for something gruesome to occur, her eyes on him, her hand steadily at her hip and gun. I'm going to muck some horse shit to expedite the matters, and hopefully, after that, you may get an appetite after all. He smirked, groping the pitchfork from the ground, and distanced himself from her, sensing she needed that. Her eyes grew wide, and mouth parted for objection, but no sound came out of it. She simply kept watching him, march into old Tucker's stall and dig the fork into the straw, picking up a glut of manure. She kept her hand at the gun on her hip, not leaving sight of him. His vest was stretched taut across his back, almost violating every groove of muscle. She looked away, set her eyes at the manure, disinterested, repulsed, wounded. This is ridiculous, she muttered through clenched teeth, and wondered whether she could get away with another murder. Tell you what, Tilghman chuckled warmly. Haven't mucked out nor shoveled shit since my 20s, I reckon. Perhaps it is ridiculous indeed, but somehow I find it worth it, he admitted, tossing the manure into the barrel. She tipped up her face and scrunched it. So, I reckon you must be someone too important to be shoveling shit, she jeered, and he sneered at that, paused, and gave her a sidelong glance over the stall's door. Wouldn't say too important, but perhaps too occupied with more important matters, he replied, lingering his gaze upon her a little longer, just enough to capture the attitude morphing her features again, beautiful in all their anger and confliction. Same difference, she said snidely. You have someone else who you think is less important than you to clean your horse's mess. He lifted the pitchfork, ready to counter that statement. No, in fact, I ain't got no horse of my own no more to clean after its mess, he said, and tossed another load. She watched the sticky, fibrous, hard lumps float midair and crumble upon their descent. The one you saw and helped me save is from the stables. I see, she nodded gravely. Then I reckon you must not hold horses in such high regard to think of them as more than just means of transportation. She poked him further, as if she still held a pitchfork herself. But he snorted once more at the assaulting statement, somehow expecting it. I reckon you must not hold me in such high regard to suggest I'm one of those yokels that rides their horses into the ground. He paused the mucking, dug the pitchfork into the straw, and rested his hands on the handle, jaw fastened upon his knuckles, gaze pinning her numb. She swallowed, her hand still hovering over her gun, I don't know you, sir. I don't hold you in any regard, high or low. Something in between, then. I'll take that. He smiled, dreadfully charming, and she tore her eyes away from that, too. You don't have to muck my stalls, Mr. Patrick. I'm not too important to do them on my own. In fact, I prefer to do them on my own, without you in here. That's fine. He nodded and placed the pitchfork aside. Seeing as I'm finished, and seeing as you're done with your part and the rest of them stalls, I suppose I may make my inappropriate proposal again. He leaned over the stall's door and leveled his gaze with hers. Won't you go out with me, Miss Amelia? The mention of the name only etched another fissure of annoyance, but she bit back her urge to express it. No, she said adamantly, and he sighed and bowed his head between his shoulders. She cut her eyes at him, measuring him from head to toe, questing for anything suspicious in some hesitation that classed her, and yet Levi never fronted any trace of evil either. His head popped up again, and she looked away once more. Come on, miss, don't you think there's a reason we meet again? He asked languidly and shamelessly coy, but pushed on the stall's door and slipped past her, donning his coat again as though ready to depart. She rolled her eyes, and he cocked a brow upon facing her again. I don't believe in things happening for a reason, unless fate takes a sick pleasure in trampling down your feelings and slowly destroying everything you ever cared about. Or perhaps that's the whole reason or purpose of life as well, she said, and he frowned at that, her words oddly pulling on his heartstrings. Maybe so, he murmured, sealing his lips in a silence that felt cold between them. My apologies, ma'am. You're right. I've been a hound to you. I'll leave you to it. He doffed his hat to her and made his way back to his horse and appeared as though he was cloaked with shame. Charlotte bit her lip, feeling the resulting isolation suddenly consume her like a dark cloud hovering over her head, smothering her whole. Mister! She called after him, loathing how desperate she sounded, but her heart bled for company, and her fear bled for shelter. He turned, frowning in bewilderment. Ma'am? I may have a proposal.